This is a exciting time. Almost no matter what you're interested in related to healthcare, there's something going on. And one of the things that has happened in the last year is that for the first time in the history of our healthcare system, Congress decided that it was time to stimulate the creation of a modern information system. The technology that Hippocrates invented was no longer enough. The fact that the entire rest of the healthcare, the rest of our economy, the rest of our lives was automated by electronic systems, and that healthcare lagged behind seemed no longer to be acceptable, especially given the huge issues that the rest of our health system has to deal with and for which information is so important. And I think that that was in some ways the critical issue, that healthcare information technology and its propagation was the overture for healthcare reform. It could have ended up being all of healthcare reform, but fortunately that wasn't the case. Nevertheless, the proper implementation of the Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health Act of 2009, or HITECH, really undergirds everything else that we wish to accomplish, including, of course, comparative effectiveness research. The image that I like to use and that plays out nicely in some of these discussions is that information is the lifeblood of medicine. We're only as good, clinicians are only as good, and in fact, policymakers are only as good as the information they have with which to make decisions. Nurses, physicians, surgeons, hospital managers, they're only, without information, they are paralyzed to adapt what's known about the person to what's known about science or effective management. And health information technology, I think, is destined to be the circulatory system for information, for the lifeblood of medicine and healthcare management. Now, if you follow that image out a little bit, you quickly realize what a challenge it is to be a circulatory system for an organism as complex as our healthcare system. The nutritional requirements for different sectors are enormously varied. You want aggregated data that's comparable and that is available to ask a whole range of different questions. As a clinician, I would want to know the laboratory and test and radiological results and medications for an individual physician, individual patient, that patient's personal and family history, the decisions and notes that other clinicians had entered into the record. If I were a radiologist, I'd want to know what the indications were for the radiology test that was being ordered and whether the patient was allergic to dye. The uses and the requirements for tailoring the information are as varied, almost, hard to make the analogy strictly, but almost as biological organisms need. Now, you should never forget that our circulatory system, the one we actually use, that everyone in this system relies on without thinking, evolved over millions of years through much trial and error, overcoming illness, adapting to new environmental experiences, learning to deal with heat, learning to deal with severe cold, learning to differentiate to the different nutritional availability, learning to deal with aging as a phenomenon as it became possible for us to age. And we were tasked in 2009, the Office of the National Coordinator, with trying to create the conditions for the circulatory system of our health system to evolve not in millions of years, but in a few short years. And I think that you can follow the challenge that we face. Though it's going to be a short evolution, it still has to be an evolution. It still has to proceed step by step. We still have to have the opportunity to build in learning, and we still have to make sure that we don't try to do too much at first, but have a plan for getting to an ultimate outcome. Now, we have a powerful set of tools to help us along the way. We have the concept of meaningful use, which I think is an inspired concept. We have a whole series of associated regulatory authorities. Meaningful use is a regulatory authority of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The Office of the National Coordinator, which I run, has authority to set standards and certification criteria for electronic health records and then to certify those records. Congress also, of course, put aside billions of dollars potentially in incentives to reward clinicians and other providers who become meaningful users of electronic health records. And they also set aside $2 billion to create the supports for meaningful use, the non-regulatory support, the human and institutional and technological support. So how are we approaching this evolutionary challenge? Well, one of the great gifts we have is this organizing concept of meaningful use. This was conceived in the Congress. It actually had been, I think, incorporated into some legislation that never passed. And under the time pressures of the effort to pass the stimulus bill in January and February of 2009, it was taken off the shelf and inserted into a opportunity created by the stimulus bill. We are defining meaningful use, in a sense, as the biologic requirement for the information that needs to be available in the circulatory system of our healthcare system. It's very valuable to have that idea as a vehicle for creating ends of the use of information, purposes for the use of information. But it also, because we are in an evolutionary process, requires that we make possible that the definition of meaningful use will change over time. And that, in fact, was something that we proposed in the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. What do we envision as the endpoint of meaningful use? A situation in which electronic health records and other health information technology capture critical data, that data flows privately and securely and as freely as possible among users of that information, that it follows patients and is available to their caretakers when they need it and available to those patients when they need it. That it serves 5 purposes that are encapsulated in the concept of meaningful use, all of which are health-related. First, that it is used to improve safety, quality, efficiency, and reduce disparities of care. Secondly, that it is used to improve public and population health. Third, that it's used to encourage coordination of care. Fourth, that it is used in a way that engages patients and their families. And fifth, that it is exchanged and used privately and securely. Those are 5 domains of meaningful use that I think will have enduring value and that were incorporated into the notice of proposed rulemaking were actually derived and recommended to us by our Health Information Technology Policy Committee, an advisory group, based on work that's been done by the Priority Partners exercise of NQF and some other associated organizations. I'm into biology today. Where does comparative effectiveness research fit in this? Well, arguably it's critical to improving quality, efficiency, and safety. And I think it's critical to improving patient and population health. Public and population health. So it is a vital part of a learning system that is the end goal of meaningful use, in addition to the other goals that I've laid out. So how do we realize the potential for comparative effectiveness research? Well, the first step in evolution is getting information into electronic form. You can imagine the endpoint all you like, but until information is included in electronic systems, it can't be mobilized for all the other purposes. And Congress made it very clear that the first path to mobilizing that information was the creation of electronic health records for the care of individual patients. Now, I'm often asked, what about the personal health record? And I think the personal health record is a very potentially valuable asset, and one that we certainly want to make room for, an opportunity for within the health system. But right now, starting where we are at the first step, at this embryonic stage of our modern health information system, the fact is that most health information, especially about the chronically ill, is generated in interactions between providers and patients. So that's where we have to start, and that's where Congress chose to have us start. Once you've got the information in a record or in an electronic system of some kind, then exchange of that information becomes critical. Exchanging information is probably the most difficult challenge we face. It's difficult because it requires human beings to collaborate. There are software and hardware problems with exchange, but the biggest challenge we have is a problem of humanware. It's individual volition, it's varying economic and professional interests, it's the size of our country, the ideological diversity and geographic diversity of our country. In fact, you can see the exchange part of what we're doing, you can see all of what we're doing as a kind of moonshot. There is no country on earth that we can look to that has accomplished what we are trying to do in the area of health information exchange.